It's time for Paleo Radio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering Paleo Radio.
Welcome to Paleo Radio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Angela. Your voice is totally sexy. My name is Jeremiah Bannister.
And I am Joe Elder.
And you're listening to Paleo Radio. We want to thank everybody tuned in right now on Spreaker and iTunes, as well as those listening on WPRR 95.3 FM in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and WPJC in Pontiac, Illinois. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, we stretch far and wide, don't we?
All over the place, literally.
All over the whole wide world.
All over the whole wide world, buddy. I'm really proud, to be honest. I'm proud of our listeners. We've got some amazing tweets and even some really funny posts on our Facebook wall throughout the week. It's just, you won't want to miss it. The whole show is going to be great. And we're going to start off, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump and whether or not he hurt himself in the last debate going against George W. Bush, and specifically by saying that they lied about it, that they knew that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and that they peddled that and that they lied us into war, whether or not it hurts him or whether it helps him in South Carolina.
Only time will tell. After that, we're going to move to the passing of Justice Scalia and what we're going to do, Democrats, Republicans alike, and their obvious strategies that they're putting forth about that.
With the passing of Scalia, just mind-blowing. It totally took me by surprise. Intelligent design without a creator, that's going to be our third topic, why evolution may be smarter than we thought.
And we're going to round it all off with Ken Ham talking about Sunday Assembly, which is close to the chest. It's going to be a fun one.
It is a little close to the chest. It's going to be tons of fun, so don't go anywhere.
And it's always fun to tease Ken Ham.
It's always fun. It is always fun to do that. So we're going to begin here. Why Donald Trump's vicious attack on George W. Bush was so brutally effective and brilliant. This is by James Poulos over at The Week. He begins by saying, the focus on Bush 43's legacy signals a big problem for the GOP. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, who declared in a prior debate that he missed the bygone president, pronounced W the winner of last night. But no matter how much Jeb Bush defended his brother, or Marco Rubio came to the former president's aid, that Bush's legacy abruptly became a question at all at this very late date dealt the establishment a potentially crippling blow.
And to me, I don't know if it was potentially crippling because I think it was inevitable. When was it not going to be mentioned in the South about George W. Bush if Jeb was still running?
He was going to, at some point or another, enter in.
It was going to have to happen.
It has to happen. And I don't know if Trump has let anybody off the hook, especially anybody connected with Jeb Bush. Now, I don't know if he's gone after Jeb's mom. I don't know if he's done that. He said that she should run, right? If she's so good, maybe she should be running instead of you. But it's going to come up eventually, and it did. And the thing is, I think the writer is right. It is about the establishment, and that whether it's Democrat or Republican, you are seeing an uprising all over the country of people who are completely dissatisfied with the establishment. We've talked about this as it expresses itself, not just in politics, but also religion. But you're seeing it because of everybody focusing and honed in on the election. You're seeing it like crazy.
If people knew the symptoms of it, they've been seeing it for a long time. Occupy Wall Street, that is a disenchanted left. And if you see the Tea Party that gets involved politically but wants to use austerity measures, that's the disenchanted right. I don't particularly think that Donald Trump is sweeping up run-of-the-mill conservatives as in like your traditional conservatives. I think he's sweeping up those people that were Tea Party members. People that were originally for the Tea Party, that when the Tea Party took reign and moved out to the direction that it moved out, where it's a semi-establishment Ted Cruz-y thing, those people stepped away from it, and they're waiting again, and now Trump has risen them back up. I think that's how it works.
And he'll have Morning Joe Republicans.
Sure.
I mean, he's got people he's got his defenders on that program. But how many conservatives are tuning into MSNBC at 6 to 9 in the morning to watch
enough.
Morning Joe? I mean, be honest.
Fair enough.
Right, kingmakers do. But at the center of all of this, literally at the center of the debate, was a statement that went a little bit like this. Donald Trump saying, quote, "The World Trade Center came down during the reign of George Bush. He kept us safe. That's not safe. The war in Iraq was a big fat mistake. They lied. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none. End quote.
That's true. And here's, I think he made the right statement. And I have to caveat this with the knowledge that most of the room was Bushite people, but they booed him hard after saying that. And I know a lot of people kind of poo-poo that, but the truth is that human beings are extremely swayed by things like booing in the crowd. They really are. I mean, like, I don't think that people are going to make their entire choice on it, but I don't think most people heard what Donald Trump said and went, you know what? He was damn right. I agree with him. I think a lot of them were like, ooh, I don't know about that. I think it depends on how far he goes.
And it depends, it was interesting to see poll numbers after that. And I'm not basing everything on a poll. I don't, especially ones that are done so frequently with current events and everything else. But when you see jumps after the debate among likely Republican voters, people who are going to vote Republican, they watch the debate and everybody's like, what's going to happen in these polls that are coming out after the fact, have him going up. And it's almost, maybe it's a referendum in a way. I think a lot of people on the right, they're deeply conflicted. On the one hand, they don't like the fact that they often forget, and many of them do, that we are still in Afghanistan.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, that's unsettling for them because they remember the heyday when they were wrapping ribbons around everything and they had all the magnets all over their cars. And it's kind of faded into the background. It's gone on for a long time, and it's reminding them of other entanglements that were frustrating. And it's costly. It's super costly. And they're seeing what happens in war when the war keeps going and your president that started it didn't finish it, and somebody from the other party takes over that you don't like, and you see what happens to the war. I mean, whether they think it was kind of bungled, or whether they think it was bad from the beginning, I think there's an element within people's heart of hearts that they just are literally conflicted. Because on the other hand, almost every Republican would say, I think George W. Bush is a sincere dude, and I'd like to probably have buffalo wings with him or barbecue or something. But he's a good guy.
I think the big kicker is this. Most people on the right will say that the Iraq War was a mistake. Most people on the right will not say that George W. Bush knew that there weren't weapons of mass destruction and sent us in there to die. They will not buy into that.
I'm wondering how long, though. That's got to give eventually, because if they're against it and they look up anything that says, hey, these are the reasons why the Iraq War was a bad idea.
But now you're asking them to be logical, which is totally not going to happen.
They need to just look up some websites, and they can find ones on the right. Listen, you should go and you should read Patrick Buchanan, and I don't say that too often publicly, but when it comes to anti-war stuff, he's literally Trump.
When I wrote my notes about it, when I was looking at it, what I had said was Trump didn't say anything that I disagree with. The Iraq War is bad, no weapons of mass destruction. The room was packed full of lobbyists, which he mentioned. He opposes cutting Social Security, pro-Planned Parenthood even, and he wanted to put tariffs on China. The thing is, that in the Republican Party hits on half and misses on half on every single one of those, and that doesn't get full votes. That gets a quarter of people in each one. When you say tariff China, you have the libertarian vote take a huge step back. When you say Social Security, and we keep Social Security, you have that libertarian group too step back. I think it depends on where you go, and it depends on what topic you get into. But one thing's unquestionable. Donald Trump's leading by a long shot. He's leading by a long shot. I also think a couple weeks ago I made the reference that reality TV shows have a very short lifespan. They're like a bottle rocket. And you see them shoot for a while, and when they pop, they just burst, and then that's that. And he's running the campaign like a reality show, and he's basing it on keeping people's interest in every single venue that he's doing. And I think in 6 months' time of this, I think that bottle rocket's going to pop.
Well, it's been 6 months. If he goes another 6, he's got 6 more. I mean, hey, during an election, this is why the only reason why I'd be like, I just don't know if it's going to be against him that he goes this way, is that Americans, by and large, especially with the demise of newspapers and radios, have committed to the idea of getting their political and cultural information through the television. And so they are increasingly going to the TV, even in small little bits, in order to get their information about this. I don't know about how much on YouTube or different things like that, but he knows how to manipulate that. That happens to be his venue. And so he's a tireless dude, been around for a long time. He's able to weather some storms. And if he's only got 6 months to a year left, and the place, his medium and where his platform is his strong suit, then it's going to be tough for him to wear down, or even for him to become boring.
Well, like how many times, for example, you remember he had a Rosie O'Donnell beef, right?
Yeah.
Donald Trump, even to this day, says things about Rosie O'Donnell. I mean, it's like 3 years past. And people, what I think about is I think about a show like The Apprentice that does well for 2 seasons, then the third season people are like, yeah, bleh, tired. But I think the way to look at it is Donald Trump has already not gone to a debate because he was mad at how he was treated, because he's a thick-skinned guy like that. That makes no sense to me. That he's a thin-skinned guy like that. Donald Trump now recently has threatened to run independently if the RNC doesn't condemn the bad things that Ted Cruz said about him. That's not thick-skinned, big-wiener Donald Trump guy. That's little-wiener, thin-skinned guy. That's scared out of my little boots guy. And how many times will voters be down with Donald Trump going forward, pulling back, and going forward and pulling back? Because I don't think you can do that for 6 months.
It's a good old-fashioned abusive relationship. The push-pull thing.
Sure.
You know, you get really intense to him, and it makes him all freaked out, and then you get really loving. And man, you know, yeah, he's got rough edges, but you know, you just got to get to really know him, and once you get to know him,
my honest opinion about Donald Trump is the same I had about the Tea Party when it first broke out. Everyone got really excited, and I said, "You're looking at an ink blot test. It's sporadic. It's popping up all over the place. It's not stable. It's volatile." The right's whole political aspect, I think, is volatile. It can blow up at any moment. It's not organized and established and well thought out in the way that the left is. I think the left's division is straight down the middle. I think the right's is splintered into tons of pieces.
The piece says, consider the logic within. In a culture where politics has become an echo chamber, a vain hall of mirrors installed by the worship of rhetoric and self-regard, true politics, the art and science of victory, is dead. The kind of actions that arise from a corrupt political culture, from the corrupted idea that politics is a game of semiotics first, are therefore also corrupted. Fake actions, actions without integrity, actions born to lose.
That's a great quote. Next, we're going to be talking about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's moving tribute to her best buddy, Justice Scalia.
It's going to be awesome. Amazing story. Controversial. Paleo Radio.
Love Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
We received a tweet from Zacrilege that says, I may have current events fatigue, but I'll never have Paleo Radio Show fatigue. Thank you very much, Zach.
I absolutely love that. Zach, and listen, guys, Zach is from the Zacrilege Cast. You can check it out. He's on iTunes and on Stitcher. He's got a YouTube channel, and you can find him on Twitter as well. He posted as well, one random thing, is Paleo Radio Show the only secular media group show that actually does show notes? Theirs are great. And, you know, I don't know the answer to this, but it's a great opportunity to let everybody know that when we post our podcasts online, you can go to Spreaker or you can go to paleoradio.secularmediagroup.com, and we have show notes. And under each topic in the show notes section are the actual links to articles that we read during the show. So you can follow what we're talking about, and you can come up with your own positions, and make sure to email us at paleoradioshow@gmail.com.
Nailed it. All right, let's move into the next topic. Read Justice Ginsburg's moving tribute to her best buddy, Justice Scalia. This is by Dara Lind from Vox.com. If you've ever believed that people can disagree passionately about politics and still respect and care for each other as friends, the friendship of Justice Antonin Scalia and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a comfort and an inspiration. He was the Supreme Court's most outspoken conservative, she is the most outspoken liberal. But their friendship became famous, not just because of its odd couple unexpectedness, but because of their mutual respect and affection for each other that was obviously genuine. So it's no surprise that of all the tributes to Justice Scalia, who died Saturday, Justice Ginsburg's is uniquely moving. Quote, "We are different, we are one. Different in that our interpretation of written texts, one in our reverence for the Constitution and the institution we serve. From our years together at the D.C. Circuit, we were best buddies. We disagreed now and then, but when I wrote from the court and received a Scalia dissent, the opinion ultimately released was notably better than my initial circulation. Justice Scalia nailed all the weak spots, the applesauce and the argle-bargle, that gave me just what I needed to strengthen my majority opinion. He was a jurist of captivating brilliance and wit, with a rare talent to make even the most sober judge laugh. The press referred to his energetic fervor, astringent intellect, peppery prose, acumen, and affability, all apt descriptions. He was eminently quotable, his pungent opinions so clearly stated that his words never slipped from the reader's grasp.
That was so powerful.
Yeah, it's very, very well done. I mean, obviously, she's a justice.
I was really happy, actually, that the Newsday kind of began yesterday, Monday, with talk of people and focusing on the commonality that they had, the friendship that these two had. Like when people come together, and maybe people don't understand this, but when newsmakers come together, they frame stories. And they say, today we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. We're going to talk about the death of Scalia. How are you going to frame that? Is it going to be, what's the next battle, for the Supreme Court? That's what's going on now. That's one of the things. But that's more party-driven. If you look at a lot of the stuff that's media-driven, they're replaying and playing and replaying over again. They're playing those clips of Scalia and Ginsburg together where they're talking and praising one another. Mm-hmm. And quite obviously very truly friends. I didn't know that they were singers.
Yeah, they were singers.
I had
and
no
they sang
idea.
Together, yeah.
It blew me away. And you think...
Interested in opera, yeah.
You think the way this plays out politically, the way this plays out culturally, it's kind of... Supreme Court justices are almost mysterious in a way, right? They're kind of tucked away, and that you don't see them do too many public appearances or interviews and things like that. And to see past that, right, to see, kind of peek behind the veil and be able to see that friendship, I think that was profound. I think it should have a profound impact. I hope it does on our entire culture. I hope that they replay and replay over and over and over and over those conversations where they're praising each other.
Continuing in the Vox article, the respect that Ginsburg's statements show for Scalia's intellect, that she could trust him and point out the flaws in her arguments, also reveals a respect of her own, to know the difference between a genuine agreement of principle and an error that needed to be corrected. But more importantly, the statement shows that it's okay for people in politics to spend time cultivating other interests like opera, and that those can be genuine basis for friendships in their own right. It gives me the idea that if you don't want political parties to go so far away from each other that they don't work with each other, it's a necessity to have relationships like this. You have to have an example that people can draw on and say, well, it's like Scalia and Ginsburg, right? Because this idea that people can't even be civil with each other outside of the political realm because of their political affiliations, I think can be dangerous in some aspects.
I heard on one of the morning shows they were talking about this, and they were saying that it wasn't always this way. That it used to be a lot different, and that they would spend time together. They would play sports together. They would eat together. They knew one another's families.
Think about Tip O'Neill and Reagan.
They were friends.
They got along. I mean, those two were vehemently opposed to each other. I don't even know what they would have agreed on. But, they were friends. Or at least civil with each other.
Cordiality, and that their lifestyles as people in Congress, that it kind of fostered an environment that was good for that.
Yeah.
Right? That was good for getting to know other people. And they said that when Newt Gingrich came in, that changed. He started telling them, go home immediately on Friday. Get in the plane, go home. And he said, one of the commentators said it became really easy to say that the person across the aisle from you in Washington was a Nazi, was a bad person, that their ideas were satanic. Right, that you distance yourself from them, and that distance and not having them in your sphere there, your day-to-day life, that makes it easier to other people. Right?
Think about it this way: how many cults are there that work with other churches often? Not many. Most cults isolate themselves and continue an echo chamber of their own rhetoric over and over and over to each other, and they just go fringe and off the rails. Like you have Jonestown and stuff like that. But the point is, it doesn't have to be a cult idea, but the point is this is how ideas spread amongst great apes on Earth, is that this is what we do. So if you have these Republican ideologies and you have these liberal ideologies, and they always stay in their own echo chambers, all it does is push more to the left and push more to the right. And I think that makes that fervent talk bubble up. That makes the more, hey, they're satanic, they're awful, they're this, they're that.
It's easier to label them bad guys with stupid ideas who are dangerous for the country.
You never see them. You never get to say that to their face.
Yeah, how often? Right, exactly. There's no duels anymore in Washington, D.C. But you say it's a real problem, and it's got to be resolved. People have to be able to spend more time together, and to see stories like this, I wish we saw these so much more. I can't repeat that enough. Right. I wish we saw these a gazillion times.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's worth noting because when this went out on Facebook and the responses that people had for it, I know that people disagree with Justice Scalia and his ideology, and I know that I don't think he was the greatest Supreme Court justice of all time. But if I can think of a couple words that can describe the way people reacted to it, it would be disgusting and classless and rude. I mean, and this is coming from the liberal group of people that say they don't play the dirty game, which they do. And I saw a lot of the dirty game being played this weekend.
I was really glad to see, we're kind of echoing somebody, Justin Schieber over at Real A Theology. I saw something with him too, where he was saying similar sentiments. Right? He was saying it's disgusting to see that it reminded him of what he saw when Osama bin Laden died, that you saw this kind of praise that was going on that, hey, it's a great thing. And he said, this is a really awkward moment. And so, yeah, it was interesting to see. But in fairness, if Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and this sucks to say, but if Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, you would have a lot of the same thing.
Oh, you would.
On the right. And that's a problem with politics in general. This is literally a condemnation. It's a flat-out condemnation of the political system and saying, this is how we treat people when they die.
And you know what? Maybe this is the hard burn, but that might be what I get for holding liberals to a higher standard than the right in certain aspects, because I learned very quickly that I shouldn't in this term, at least. Because you really kind of expect that to be coming from the right more than you would the left. Or maybe that's maybe just where I sit in the plane.
What do you think about the debate going on with should the Senate go through the process and confirm?
Oh, God, they absolutely should go through the process, without a question.
Should they in their heart, because we were talking about this before, and I kind of launched the idea of, well, what if they go through the process, even though they still hold in the back pocket the idea that they're simply not going to, in any circumstance, let somebody through? And you were saying that would be kind of the same problem of saying don't send anybody in. In fact, it might even be more narcissistic.
I think it would be way more narcissistic and way more offensive to the process. Maybe somebody saying, well, they should at least go through the process. That's not going through the process. That's like saying we should go through the process of hiring somebody, and you go, oh, I have my guy. We'll bring 3 more people in for interviews, but we're going to hire this one. Was that really a process? No. It would not necessarily. No. I mean, you had it in your mind exactly what was going to happen from the word go. There was no actual professionalism being done. And so I think it's kind of the same case here.
And it would be offensive to the people going through that process.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're a judge and you're being appointed by a president, right, like the president of the United States, and you're going before the Senate to be confirmed and go through the whole process, and for them the entire time to go through the questioning,
yeah,
and say, well, we're giving you questions, but there's just no way in the world, no matter what you say and answer, that we're going to do that. That would be offensive to the person. It would be a gross injustice.
Yeah. I'm going to Jiminy Cricket for a minute, man, because if I could wish upon a star, I think it would be that the whole thing's different, that the whole political process is different. I totally understand why there's so much political pandering and jargon going back and forth about replacing the seat, and I understand how people want to expedite it or how people want to grind their feet on it based on your political position, but I just wish the whole thing was different, man. I do.
I do,
it's
too.
upsetting.
You know, John Mosiman wrote something, and I don't do this often, but I don't comment very often on Facebook. Our boy, John Mosiman, you got to check him out. He's amazing. But he posted this meme, right? It's a debatable one. We were talking about it with Nathan, our sound maestro before it, talking about Schumer and what happened back in 2007. But I said it's a disgrace on both sides. I'm sick and tired of hearing anyone, Republican or Democrat, talk about the Constitution as the supreme law of the land when these parties have a stranglehold on the entire process. It's a joke.
It's an absolute joke. Scalia and Ginsburg showed just how much everyone else was missing. That won't be as significant to Scalia's legacy as his jurisprudence, but maybe it should be.
We'll be right back.
If you leave, you can't come back in. Paleo Radio will return.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
We're back with more Paleo Radio. And we have this awesome post on our Facebook page. If you want to check it out, I strongly encourage you to do it. It's facebook.com/Paleo Radio. It's posted by my cousin, right? I have to let everybody know this. Derek Bannister, and it's hilarious. He posted on the wall. It said, "Criminal justice reform we can all believe in." And it's got a picture... Right? It's got a picture, and there's
Morgan Freeman,
but it says Nelson Mandela under it.
It's so wrong, it's right.
Right, and it says, "Tattoos are only for violent criminals." And here's a quote: "Tattoos are stupid. Why would you mark your skin with such sinful images? I spent 27 years in prison. Every tattooed person in there was a criminal. The only way to explain this is that all tattooed people are criminals." End quote. Nelson Mandela, 2015.
Which is 2 years after his death.
You have to see it. And it's from, what's the name of the website?
It's Tattoos Ruin Lives.
Tattoos Ruin Lives.
It's
it is
satirical, and it is wonderful.
Oh, it is just the funniest.
It's as good as it can get. Now, talking about wonderful or as good as it can get, we have some awesome news in science that's been jumping out at us recently. We want to cover that. Intelligent design without a creator? Why evolution may be smarter than we thought. This is an article that was written by Richard Watson out of IFL Science. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution offers an explanation for why biological organisms seem so well designed to live on our planet. This process is typically described as unintelligent, based on random variations with no direction. But despite its success, some oppose this theory because they simply don't believe living things can evolve in increments. Something as complex as the eye, for example, on an animal, they argue, must be the product of an intelligent creator.
It got me when it said, because they don't believe living things can evolve in increments.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's people, that's a main argument of someone who's a creationist, though, right? Is that, how can a saber-toothed tiger turn into just a lion? That's crazy. You know,
all of a sudden.
Suddenly. Well, they think like a
zoinks.
Saber-toothed tiger had a baby and it was a lion. Like all of a sudden, boop, oh, it's got a mane, now it's a different species.
Like, look, evolution
And
happened.
it's just simply not understanding how it works.
Not how it works.
I don't think involving a supernatural creator can ever be a scientifically useful explanation. This is back in the article. But what about intelligence that isn't supernatural? Our news results, based on computer modeling, link evolutionary processes to the principles of learning and intelligent problem solving without involving any higher powers. This suggests that, although evolution may have started off blind, with a couple of billion years of experience, it's actually gotten smarter.
It's like a smartphone.
It is. It's like
learning.
a smartphone.
It's learning basically with patterns.
That's right.
And in use and experience.
And when people say it's getting smarter, it's getting more intelligent, we have to define what that is, and the article dives into that a
right.
little
Nature
bit.
doesn't have a brain.
No.
It's not like we can go and find the mothership.
And link the neurons to find out.
Link
Exactly.
the neurons together.
But it does go to show that when people think about evolution, they should think about it as template sharing. The DNA structure of a species is its template, and it gets shared over and over through mating with each other. But what this article is really basically saying is that through being alive, that turns on or off certain genes, which give you genetic predispositions when you pass those genes on to your offspring, which can change the template. And this is how evolution can get smarter over time. Right? So intelligence can be many things, but sometimes it's nothing more than looking at a problem from the right angle. Finding intelligent solutions can be just about recognizing that something you assume to be a constant might actually be a variable. It can also be about approaching a problem with the right building blocks.
That's huge, though.
Oh, it's huge.
You know, and some of it's, some of it's just so simple. The idea of looking at the problem from the right angle. That's one dynamic of it. Or recognizing that something you assume to be a constant might be a variable. That's almost poetic.
I think
beautiful.
that's the thing to really think about, is that the capability that evolution has is so broad that we're just beginning to understand it. I mean, the whole concept of evolution isn't even 150 years old.
There's an illustration of this on the site there that you should go check out. Once again, you can find that at Intelligent Design Without a Creator at iflscience.com. But they have this exercise where they have what looks like two square pieces of paper. One of them is a picture of Charles Darwin, and then they're trying to figure out if you put another piece of paper, a bigger square, underneath it, how would you have to position that in order to, if you were to fold it over, that it would completely cover the picture of Charles Darwin. If that sounded confusing, I encourage you all the more to go check it out because it's a lot of fun. It's a cool exercise. You got to go check it out.
But it gets to an interesting point about what intelligence is. Going back to the article, in humans, the ability to approach a problem with an appropriate set of building blocks comes from experience because we learn. But until now, we have believed that evolution by natural selection can't learn. It simply plods on, banging away relentlessly at the same random variation hammer. Incrementally accumulating changes when they happen to be beneficial was the previous assumption. But that's changed now. This study is showing some different things, right?
It's the evolution of evolvability.
Yeah.
That's the way they call it there. And they say it depends on appropriate variation, selection, and heredity.
The cornerstones of Darwin.
They are. I mean, that's kind of exactly what it's about. Interestingly, all of these components can be altered by past evolution, meaning past evolution can change the way that future evolution operates.
So let's put this into perspective, right? Human beings are predominantly right-handed. It's not to say that there aren't some that are left-handed. There's some genetic variation there, but most people are right-handed, and we have the same limb on each side. But what's happened over time is through use, genetically, we've been predisposed to have a benefit to using our right hand more often. So that template has been passed on more often than it being left. And that's simply the reason why people are right-handed over left. Or it's the same reason why a crab has a bigger pincher with one hand and a smaller one with the other, is because while it was living, it's doing two different activities with those limbs, which as it passes down its template, changes the template and is more beneficial to use those limbs or evolve to benefit what those limbs are doing.
And it's not set in stone forever that that's going to remain that way.
No, it can change dramatically.
Yeah, totally. You could have a completely different... That's the whole point.
And the idea is, and this goes back to Darwin too, how adaptable a species is. So look at something like a mouse. A mouse is one of the most adaptable species on Earth. They are in every single continent almost, every single continent but Antarctica.
They float with you.
Mice. They're all over the place.
Around, right.
They swim. They can fit through things. They can compress their bodies. They've adapted in amazing ways, and they're not nearly the strongest creature around, but they're definitely the most adaptable, which is a benefit.
Oh, totally. And it says this, quote, such changes alter the building blocks available to future evolution. If past selection has shaped these building blocks well, it can make solving new problems look easy. Easy enough to solve with incremental improvement.
Isn't that something?
If you have success, it makes future success maybe a little easier.
Yeah. Now that is amazing.
The better's winning all the time, then the better gets better.
Watson writes, our work shows that the evolution of a regulatory connection between genes, which govern how genes are expressed in our cells, has the same learning capabilities as neural networks. In other words, gene networks evolve like neural networks learn.
When I was reading the article, it brought me back to Mary Freebed, where my daughter was in therapy after her surgery, and where they were talking about how there was damage done to the brain because of the cancer. And so the idea was, if she has mild paralysis, if she's got paralysis on the right side of her body, how can we try to get any of this activity back? And the idea was to find these new neural connections, right? Mm-hmm. To make new pathways.
Make new ones.
And they figured out, and I'm wondering, I'm like, this sounds a lot like that.
This is exactly what it is. And it's saying that I'm using the analogy of a template because that's the best way to think about it, but it's the same exact type of way a neural network relearns. Is the genetic code can change when it passes on, which it gets better at producing the genes. So that gives us the idea of when you look at something like a seaweed dragon. Now, people are like, what the hell is that? Look it up. I tell you, Google it. They're awesome. It's a relation to a seahorse, but they actually look like the seaweed that they float around, and you go, how in the world can something look like that or come to look like that? Or animals like stick bugs. right? How can they get that amazing at that camouflage? Well, it's because of the gene variation while they're alive and how fast evolvability works in their species.
Is it octopi, if you're talking plural?
Yes.
Yeah, I have seen octopi that do, I'm serious, that do a similar thing, that you would not even know that they were there.
Yeah.
That they were completely camouflaged into their surroundings.
And so this is revolutionary. This explains how animals get to the way they are, where people have, like we said, it's the assumption of what happens one day a monkey just had a human, right? I mean, those arguments don't understand about the theory of how the template gets passed down. And it's over time and it's incremental. And incrementally with time, the gene pool gets smarter the same way you get smarter as you experience things and you learn them. And that's a simple evolutionary trait and a simple process that we're learning more about now. It's pretty awesome.
And it's about maximizing rewards.
Oh, yeah. Always is.
It always is. Whether it seems like that's the way of the universe. It's always maximizing rewards. It's saying, ooh, piece of candy. Ooh,
exactly.
Piece of candy.
Well, Watson, again, he writes, while connections in neural networks change in direction that maximizes rewards, natural selection changes genetic connections in the direction that increases fitness. The ability to learn is not in itself something that needs to be designed. It's an inevitable product of random variation and selection when acting on connections.
That happens.
Oh, yeah.
If you have enough of these connections shooting all over the place, you're bound to get the stuff that works, and then stuff that works better, and stuff that builds off the stuff that works better, on and on and on.
So, when an evolutionary task we guessed would be difficult, such as producing the eye, it turns out to be possible with incremental improvement. Instead of concluding that dumb evolution was sufficient after all, we might recognize that evolution was very smart to have found building blocks that make the problem look easy.
We'll end it this way. We're running out of time. Interestingly, Alfred Russel Wallace, who suggested a theory of natural selection at the same time as Darwin, later used the term intelligent evolution to argue for divine intervention in the trajectory of evolutionary processes. If the formal link between learning and evolution continues to expand, the same term could become used to imply the opposite.
How ironic.
Powerful.
Up next, Ken Ham, Sunday Assembly. It's going to be fantastic.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact paleoradioshow@gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
If you guys love Paleo Radio, which we obviously know that you do, please come support us by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio and donating to us today. Honestly, it's as much as a Sunday paper, isn't it?
It is. It's super cheap. And you know what? You get tons and tons of brilliance, bro.
Tons of it.
Tons of it. And I'll tell you something that's lacking a lot of brilliance. There's an article here by Ken Ham called... Actually, it's not by Ken Ham. I take this back.
It's about him, though.
It's about Ken Ham. It's actually by Stoyan Zymov over at the Christian Post. Ken Ham, atheistic Sunday assembly rips off church like nuns rip off marriage.
It's almost like he knew that you were at Sunday assembly less than a month ago.
I was.
Yeah.
And that I preached the launch for Sunday Assembly Grand Rapids.
So it's Ken Ham. His spidey sense was tingling.
Right. He knew it was me. So Answers in Genesis CEO and President Ken Ham has accused the atheistic Sunday Assembly, in quotation, movement by hypocritically following its own religious dogma, while at the same time ripping off the best aspects about going to church. This philosophy that everyone can make their own decisions and that no one should be told what to believe or where to get their rules is a form of religious dogma.
Not just dogma, but religious dogma, huh?
Right.
Like, that's quite a stretch.
Right. And saying that, they're trying to rip off the best aspects. Now, this is taken from a quote by Lena, a friend of mine, somebody who was quoted on M Live here in Grand Rapids, and she is going to be the facilitator, basically. She's the one kind of leading it. Before, it was Susan Walsh. She's from the Detroit branch that was over there. Those are the people who were leading it. But she said that that's something that they like to do. And he said, that's not what you're doing. You're not ripping off the best parts. The best parts are things like Jesus.
Oh, sure.
So obviously that's given the fact that he's a Christian. He's obviously going to say that. But he's upset about it. He says, but the idea that everybody can make their own decisions and that no one should be told what to believe. I mean, just break that down. Just leave it there for a second. Let it settle in real deep there and say for real that people are allowed to make their own decisions and that they're not allowed to be told what to do. That's something really weird.
Well, let's get into the actual definitions, because that's what matters. Is what are you trying to say here, Mr. Ham? The definition of the word dogma is a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority that is incontrovertibly true. What's the authority that says you don't have an authority? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a non-baseball card collector has a hobby type talk.
Now, he could say, but Sunday Assembly, they might say our position, and they did. They read from their charter. They could say their position is that they don't have a dogma. So you would say that the dogma of the place is that they don't have a dogma.
Our authoritative argument is that there is no authoritative argument.
And that they're the ones, and if he said, well, but they're the ones who are saying it, and so they're the authority figures in this scenario. Say, maybe as an operative principle, I mean, it's an organization. Like, there are people in charge. But it's not something that says you must believe this at all. This is for all people at all times in all places. And that's a formulation that anyone who's familiar with historical Christianity and the definition of dogma, they would know exactly that those are some fancy words. Those have some meaning right there. That's not what's being said, even by the authorities at Sunday Assembly.
Oh, no. If we were in a debate club, I wouldn't have too much of a problem trying to probably argue dogma in the debate against Sunday Assembly. Maybe I could get it, but saying religious dogma, that's well beyond even an argumentative attempt. How are you going to have a religious dogma at Sunday Assembly, which is outspokenly against religion?
They could believe that it would be best if everybody just simply did what they would like to believe. Let's say somebody philosophically believed that. Right? That's different. What happens in the situation where somebody disagrees? If you leave room for the possibility that that person can still live their life, if you follow that by, well, that's actually kind of part of my whole thing, is that there's people who disagree. And you exist too, and you have the right to do what you're doing. And so long as you are literally not hurting somebody, pretty much, I mean, it's kind of how we roll with it, you're actually okay. At that point, you are demonstrating that it is not a dogma. It's not something that anybody else has to believe. You're demonstrating it by showing that when somebody doesn't believe along with you, that's perfectly fine.
Exactly. And I think it just comes down to, again, it's like definitions. If we want to whittle the word dogma down to anybody that you trust saying something that you believe, then everything's a dogma. What your mom tells you when you're a kid is a dogma. Don't touch that, it's hot. Oh, man, that's unconceivably true. You know what I mean? I'm only bringing up the point to say that argument can go a ways, but what Ken Ham's arguing isn't just dogma. It's not that, these people have a doctrine that they live by, which that's not really something that people would have too much of a problem against. It's that he throws religion in front of it, which makes it an entirely different claim.
You know, and the whole idea of stealing things. You know what I mean? And I've heard that, not just from him. I've heard it from other people, too, other religious people. And I'll say this, first of all. Only religious people with something to lose, something to be afraid of, or in a losing situation, right, where their privilege is starting to slip. Those are the only ones who are going to have a real problem with this sort of institution rising. If you understand the description, the idea that you would have a place to celebrate life, that's literally the core message of this. And when I spoke, Nathan, right? Nathan's with us. Give a shout out to him. He's the one who makes us sound so fantastic on the radio. He was there. It was even something that was stated in the official proclamation. It's a celebration of life. It's a place where people will eventually be able to marry, be able to mourn and honor the dead, a place to network socially, a place to coordinate for charity. Religion doesn't have a monopoly, and if it does, it's not winning.
It's losing, at least.
It's losing.
Yeah, Boardwalk is open. No. What I wrote down when I was reading through this is, especially in this tenet of saying that they're ripping off qualities, I just wrote, thus proving there's nothing being done in the church that can't be done without God in the community. And that's the threat. The threat is, hey, if people aren't having, bake sales for Jesus, why can they have bake sales? Like, they're worried about the idea that people can have a community structure that's not centered around the deity. And the truth is, people have long had community structures that aren't centered around deities. It's not a new thing. It's not like everybody had a monotheistic deity they followed till the end of time.
That's like something that was brought up today on Facebook, actually. In the whole idea of decency predating religion.
Absolutely.
Right? The kind of idea. And this played out on Facebook. You got to check it out. It's easy to find.
It definitely did. After Hitchens' quote.
It was the Hitchens quote. It's at facebook.com/Paleo Radio. But the idea that something precedes the other, that you can say in that situation, to say the decency, that precedes religion because religion would arise from that. The formulation of these things, the organizational structuring of preceding sentiments. I mean, it's just a given. I mean, it's so obvious when you look back on it and really think about it. The idea that religion would precede those things is a very bizarre thing to even try to think about, even if you're a religious person.
Yeah, I think some people think about it like a chicken and the egg argument, right? Well, we don't have morals or decency without religion. Well, how did religion come about without the morals and decency in the first place to get people behind your good idea? People had to have been inherently thinking about being peaceful when you pitch. There had to have been people that were like, yeah, peace. I've already been kind of thinking about that. That sounds way better than this killing stuff. I'm with you. And in a way, it just proves that the idea of decency and morality was there before the doctrine got there, or probably before language even got there, I would argue.
Right. And I think if you peel away all the spirituality that goes along with church and religion, you've got an organizational structure of an institution. You have tons of them, and they're diverse. You have all different kinds. You have Presbyterian, you have Episcopalian, you have Congregational, etc. There's a whole bunch. If you look at it and you say, can a secular person look at that organizational structure minus superfluous spirituality? Can they look at that and say, I think we could actually do a lot of those things together without kind of being hypocritical with our philosophy about God or about the world or secularism?
And, I can see for people where there's a value in doing it, and I am definitely more of the kin to what they would call the Bill Maher atheist in terms of Sunday assembly, where I'm like, my favorite part about being an atheist is that it takes up so little of my time. In the sense I'm not involved in many atheist community things, but it's not to say I won't be, but it's a preference of mine. But that doesn't mean I don't see the inherent value of other people that want that using it, and I don't think it's a weakness. I don't think it's anything other than just an alternate form of how you want to live your life differently.
And vice versa.
And one more thing, too, and this is the big thing, is that the church does not have a trump card on people that just meet together in a room to talk about life and improving themselves. That's not a church value. That's been a human value since we sat around campfires with words. And it's not something that they have the monopoly on. And they say things like, well, it's ripping off the best parts of the church, this whole giving to the community and going and meeting and listening to talks and being introspective and thinking about being a good person. None of that has much to do with God as much as it does have to do with just human existence.
I'll throw this out there, though. I'll get a little bit deeper than Ken Ham can, because I've actually read some books on this topic.
Or in general.
In general, and outside of my paradigm, in ways that kind of challenges me to think differently. But to look at the history of groupishness and to look at the way that people come together with common cause, or at least common sentiments, even feelings and emotions, to come together. If those groups come together and they have a very loose common core, very loose creed of sorts, historically anyway, those have kind of gone to the wayside. In fact, with great haste. They've gone fast. Whereas historically ones with stronger ties end up retaining their membership, even if that ends up being small through periods, which is why most of those groups have, in their lore, they have the idea of being a remnant, a small group that remained and then got bigger and then got smaller and went through that because they have a very strict common core. Mm-hmm. Sunday Assembly does not have a creed. That's part of their statement. It's part of what they are. This is going to have difficulties. I mean,
herding cats, kind of, right?
It's going to be a difficult thing, and it's new. And, it's put together with the greatest of intentions. I believe in what they're doing for the kind of people who would be interested in that kind of a thing. But At the same time, there's going to be challenges in the future. I'm interested to see how they face those challenges and how Sunday Assembly ends up in the record books.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid and interesting point to make. I have to go back to this before we finish because this is just a classic ham sandwich here. He says, quote, "It's also fascinating to note that they're concerned with the health of their members and have a desire to generously give their time and resources to each other. But why do they even bother with this when they believe that at death a person ceases to exist?" So that right there shows you where Ken Ham's coming from, right? Because when we talk about things like morality comes from empathy. Empathy comes from understanding other people. What understanding does he have of other people where he says, without this lack of God, what in the world are they doing even caring about each other? You know, I mean, dude, that is a moral compass that is always spinning. Makes no sense.
It's completely crazy.
And it shows that he doesn't understand, like, that's why he doesn't understand Sunday Assembly, is because he assumes without God, why would you do good things for people? They should be out on the street eating bat heads.
This is the hardest segue in the universe, Joe. But we're going to be eating bat heads over on Sacrilege Cast this week.
That's right, all of us non-religious people, us non-believers. We're going to be joining him on his podcast and recording that, but we will give you the details in terms of when it's going to be airing on Facebook and Twitter.
And this is awesome. My daughter and I are going to be presenting God and Cancer, the Team Tiny Dancer story, at Ferris State University in Big Rapids, Michigan on Wednesday, February 24th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Get out there and support JB. In the meantime, thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next week.
You've been listening to Paleo Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.